We've all heard of climate change, and we know that it's caused primarily by the increase of greenhouse gases. There are a number of ways that humans are putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and agriculture is one of the leading causes. A new report from the Food and Agriculture Organization says livestock production is one of the major causes in the world's most pressing environmental problems, including global warming, land degradation, air and water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. Livestock production emits 9% of the U.S.'s greenhouse gas emissions and 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Of those greenhouse gases, livestock accounts for 9% of carbon dioxide and 35% of methane production globally.
Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane absorb outgoing radiation coming from the heat of the Earth, and once absorbed, only half of the radiation is emitted into space and the other half is sent back to Earth. This process keeps our Earth warm. However, humans have been adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere through actions like livestock production. This increase of greenhouse gases causes rising global temperatures.
There are numerous steps in producing livestock that consume a large amount of energy and emit greenhouse gases. First, crops need to be grown to feed the livestock. This requires the production and transportation of fertilizer. The crops then need to be farmed and dried, and then the oil is extracted to produce fodder, which is feed for the livestock. This feed then gets transported to the livestock, and the livestock actually have to get reared, and later they are slaughtered and cut, sent to retailers, and transported once again to consumers. Clearly, there are a lot of steps involved in the meat production process, and there are associated transportation and processing emissions at each step.
Furthermore, it is more efficient for humans to consume grains directly than it is to consume animals that consume those grains. In the US alone, more than 70% of grain produced is used to feed farm animals. If all this grain went to human consumption, it would be much more efficient, not only in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but also in regards to water and land use. Feed production also causes high greenhouse gas emissions because of fertilizer production and breakdown, on-farm fossil fuel use, and land use change.
Much global deforestation happens in order to make space for livestock production and the crops that feed the livestock. In total, 30% of Earth's landmass is being used for food production. That's the size of Asia. Converting land from forest to pasture releases a lot of carbon dioxide, especially when forests are burned instead of just logged.
Animal digestion emits methane. Cattle have a 4-chambered stomach where the food they consume ferments. This fermentation results in methane as a byproduct. One cow's annual output of methane, about 100 kilograms, is equivalent to the emissions generated by a car burning 235 gallons of gasoline. Methane from the decomposition of animal manure is also a factor, estimated to total just over 10 million tons, or some 4% of global anthropogenic methane emissions.
It also takes a large amount of water to sustain animals until slaughtered. Half of the water used in the US is used to produce grain for livestock. If this wasn't used for livestock, then all this water could be redistributed to areas that really need it.
Livestock production emits a lot of greenhouse gases, and human-caused climate change from greenhouse gas emission is already having and will continue to have a number of implications, such as rising sea levels, ocean acidification, rising temperatures, and species extinctions. So what can you do to help? It's pretty clear that animal agriculture causes a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions. These are emissions that we can reduce. Since livestock production emits so much greenhouse gases, one way to reduce this is to lessen or cut out the meat in your diet. A vegetarian's greenhouse gas emissions from food consumption are 2/3 that of an average American's, and half of that of a meat lover's, someone who eats twice as much meat as average. Switching to a diet free of meat, dairy, and eggs saves 50% more carbon emissions than driving a Prius. Choosing to become vegetarian can be hard. Even simple steps like changing the types of meat you eat or eating meat one day less a week can make a big difference. In fact, simply substituting all beef in your diet with chicken will cut 1/4 of emissions.
Bon Appetit at Colorado College is taking steps to provide a more sustainable food service. Colorado College is trying to mitigate carbon emissions through Meatless Mondays at Rastel. However, Benji's usually makes an additional $1,500 on Mondays, and Rastel has about 100 fewer diners. It's important for students to go to Rastel for Meatless Mondays to actually have an impact on the amount of meat consumed.
Whether you choose to be a vegetarian or to go to Meatless Mondays once a week, your dietary choices can make a big impact on reducing climate change.